Trump exonerated with full acquittal by the U.S. Senate. But will Democrats ever accept the outcome of the election and move this country forward? Hello, this is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government. DailyTorch.com. Hit that subscribe button. Today we're going to be talking about the acquittal by the United States Senate of President Donald Trump on both articles of impeachment, abuse of power, and obstruction of Congress. The president has been found not guilty by majorities 53 to 47 on the obstruction of Congress charge and 52 to 48 on the abuse of power charge. And so majorities and on both articles are saying that President Trump is not guilty. And so it's time to move forward. It's time to move on from impeachment. And I have to say, President Trump, he's riding high, not only from winning the trial, but a triumphant State of the Union address, and also a great booming economy. It's looking increasingly unlikely Democrats will be able to beat President Trump in November when American people go back to the polls. Trump's opponents, though, they can blame no one but themselves. Trump's durability is a phenomenon of their own making. The president has had to endure an unending series of attempts to either prevent him from taking office or to remove him once he did. In 2016, the Trump campaign was under an active investigation by intelligence agencies and the Justice Department and surveillance. But it turns out the FBI did not even interview the sources of the Steele Dossier that was saying that President Trump was a Russian agent, that his campaign was Russian agents, until January 27th, when the FISA warrant was being renewed. When President Trump had already been elected, they go in to renew the FISA warrant, but it turns out they had information that the source of the Steele Dossier was basically contradicting Steele. They knew that it was fake or that there were problems with the allegations, but they kept on going with the surveillance and the investigation to the detriment of this country. There was an attempt in December of 2016 to overturn the results of the Electoral College based upon these phony, baloney allegations. There was an open letter to National Intelligence Director James Clapper from a few electors saying, quote, the electors required to know from the intelligence community whether there are ongoing investigations into ties between Donald Trump, his campaign, or associates, and Russian government interference in the election. We further require a briefing on all investigative findings, as these matters directly impact core factors in our deliberations of whether Mr. Trump is fit to serve as President of the United States. But it turns out that the allegations into President Trump by the Steele Dossier and intelligence agencies were false. And they've been now debunked by not only the Inspector General Michael Horowitz report, but also from Special Counsel Robert Mueller. We'll get to him. So there was an attempt to overturn the Electoral College. Michael Flynn was targeted by the FBI on the basis of these ridiculous allegations by the Justice Department, and the FBI targeted him. And some people like Eli Lake at Bloomberg, he's no Trump supporter, but he thinks that Michael Flynn is owed an apology and that he was unjustly targeted for surveillance and questioning because they thought that the president and his campaign were Russian agents. So Michael Flynn must have been a Russian agent too. Of course, Mueller finds none of that to be true. But before Mueller was appointed, it led to the recusal of former Attorney General Jeff Sessions. These stupid allegations. James Comey, he was caught repeatedly lying to the president about the extent of the investigation, and that's why he was fired. He knew the FBI investigation was ongoing when he told the president it wasn't ongoing against him. And he even admitted in an ABC News interview with George Stephanopoulos on April 15, 2018, it, quote, might have been a mistake, admitting that when he assured President-elect Donald Trump that he was not under FBI investigation for Russia collusion, it was very misleading. And that's why he got fired. No one should be surprised there. And then, but even after that, the Mueller report ended up exonerating President Trump of any wrongdoing. It found, quote, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities, and, quote, the evidence does not establish that the president was involved in an underlying crime related to Russian election interference. There was also the question of obstruction of justice in the course of this ridiculous investigation, but even then, the Justice Department exonerated President Trump. Mueller, he didn't answer that question. He said, here's a bunch of stuff that might be related to obstruction of justice. That went to the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General, then Deputy Rod Rosenstein, and they found that there was no crime. Quote, the evidence developed during the special counsel's investigation is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense without regard to the constitutional considerations that surround the indictment and criminal prosecution of a sitting president, meaning even if the Justice Department could indict a sitting president, they can't, but let's pretend they could. The president would not have been charged in the Russiagate affair under Attorney General William Barr and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. After that, it was immediately on to the next thing. Oh, we couldn't get president on Russiagate. We can't get him being a Russian agent. We can't get him on obstruction of justice. Mueller's a failure. Let's just move on to the next thing, leading to the most recent attempt to remove President Trump from office with this impeachment. But it was a flop. Nobody could show that President Trump was engaged in any criminal wrongdoing. There was no crime cited in the articles of impeachment, so nobody should be surprised that the Senate found that therefore this is not an impeachable, removable offense. Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution says, quote, the president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for or conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. And the founders, the framers of the Constitution, they anticipated that a removed president from office would face prosecution because the reason for removing him was a crime, something violated the law. Quote, the convicted party shall be liable and subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to the law. But they didn't cite any laws that the president violated in a criminal matter that you would go to jail for. They look at the Impoundment Control Act and say, oh, the president needed to not withhold military assistance to Ukraine, but the funds were ultimately released. And that's therefore there was no quid pro quo. There was only a presumption by one ambassador who thought that the military assistance was being leveraged, but nobody communicated that to Ukraine. Finally, President Trump in his conversation on July 25th, 2019, never leveraged the military assistance with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And all he said about the Bidens was that they should take a second look at Burisma, natural gas. He wasn't saying to investigate Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. He said Joe Biden had one of your prosecutors fired, and the investigation into natural gas firm Burisma, they're corrupt. It was cut short. And so you might want to take a second look at Burisma. The fact that Bidens were involved, well, that's their fault. That doesn't mean that the Trump administration was ordering an investigation of the Bidens. Oh, maybe they could. If the question is the Bidens, the government does have a compelling legal interest to ensure that Americans do not profit from Ukrainian oligarchs from the Yanukovych regime that was removed from power by Joe Biden in 2014. Burisma was run by Yanukovych energy minister who allegedly awarded natural gas exploration rights to himself. And that could be potentially a legal problem under U.S. law. It talks about recovery of assets linked to government corruption in Ukraine, 22 U.S.C. 8904. This goes directly to Hunter Biden. What it says is, quote, the Secretary of State in coordination with the Attorney General and the Secretary of Treasury shall assist on an expedited basis as appropriate the government of Ukraine to identify, secure, and recover assets linked to acts of corruption by Viktor Yanukovych, members of his family, or other former or current officials of the government of Ukraine and their accomplices in any jurisdiction through appropriate programs. So if Hunter Biden was profiting off of a Ukrainian oligarch who stole money during the Yanukovych administration, Hunter Biden might have to return the money. So that gives you a compelling legal interest to inquire with Ukraine about corruption by Americans potentially, but certainly by Burisma, and to recover any assets that were stolen from the Ukrainian people. Ukraine has had a series of investigations into Burisma because they were stealing, because the energy minister under the Yanukovych administration was awarding natural gas exploration rights to himself. I think that's a big problem, and President Trump was well within his rights to address that directly with the president of Ukraine in an honest manner that will improve U.S.-Ukrainian relations. We can't have Americans, and certainly not vice presidents, getting involved with their internal investigations and obstructing their own justice over there. I think that's a terrible foreign policy, but that's what the Obama administration was doing. It was leveraging loans to get this prosecutor fired. It was telling Yanukovych in 2014 that he needed to get out of office because they were trying to get a European Union Ukraine trade agreement passed. And so they kicked Yanukovych out of power. It leads directly to a civil war. Crimea is seceding from Ukraine. Eastern provinces in the Donbass region are seceding from Ukraine. Pro-Russian forces have taken over those regions. And this was a completely avoidable conflict that the Obama administration had heavy hands in. And now President Trump is trying to clean up the mess Obama and Biden left behind. In any event, the effort to impeach President Trump was doomed to fail from its inception, particularly owing to the fact that Senate is owned by Republicans. They have a majority there. There was never any chance that President Trump was going to be convicted, let alone removed from office. The Democrats, they rushed this whole process too. They didn't even bring all their witnesses on the House side. They tried to bring in mystery witnesses on the Senate side when the Senate was under no obligation with Republicans in control. Maybe if they had a majority, Democrat majority, they could have gotten those witnesses on the Senate side and then spread the witness testimony out. But Senate Republicans, they want to approve judges. They want to, win back the courts. That's their job. That's what Mitch McConnell's up to. He doesn't want to waste his time calling witnesses so that Democrats can eventually fail in removing Trump. He can put the pedal to the metal and say, we're not convicting Trump. In any event, the Democrats should have litigated their subpoenas. They didn't. That's their fault. Oh, well, now the matter is past us and we need to move on. The Senate has acquitted Trump of all charges. He's not guilty. In short, President Trump has prevailed against everything his opponents have thrown at him: Russiagate, Mueller, impeachment, and so forth. And I'll leave you with the close here. Combine the president's stamina with the lowest peacetime unemployment in modern history, sustained economic growth, new trade deals with Canada, Mexico, China, Japan, and South Korea, and new tax cuts and deregulation, which the president highlighted in his great State of the Union address, and you have a solid recipe for President Trump's reelection in 2020. This is a president who never gives up, and he will never surrender. So why would, and he keeps winning, so why would 2020 be any different? But the real question is, will Democrats, when Trump wins, will they accept the outcome of the 2020 election and move this country forward, or are they going to continue this never-ending impeachment coup? That's the commentary. This is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a good day.